And for a view on the situation in Mali from across the Atlantic, let's go to Washington now, where we're joined live by former Pentagon official Michael Maloof. Well, militants have killed 2 foreigners and are holding some 20 American, European and Japanese nationals in a gas field in Algeria, as I was just saying a little earlier. This all, of course, is in apparent retaliation to what's happening in Mali. Is this not what Paris has been warned against?
Paris was fully aware of it, and I think that the United States was aware of it too. This demonstrates how the Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb and Islamic Maghreb basically are coordinating their activities, and this is part of an overall Al-Qaeda plan to basically take that northern part of Africa as a stepping stone into Europe itself. And there's been threats in Paris already by Malians, and what's really tragic is the fact that the United States trained a lot of these now terrorists who basically defected from the government and know many of our activities and know how we operate from a special forces standpoint and can use them against us.
So why did that training initiative go so badly wrong then?
Well, the training went great at the time that it happened. What happened was that they defected, and the man who led the coup was a military man, and he was actually trained by U.S. forces, and so he has insight. And I think General Ham, one of our top commanders, basically has declared it to be a disaster that we are confronted with this problem right now. These troops are very well trained. They were involved not only in Libya but also in Mali, and they basically turned. They were Tuaregs, and now they've joined forces with the AQIM.
So doesn't the U.S.
which is Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb.
Right. But before I ask you more about the rebels and the makeup, because it's so easy to call them Al-Qaeda, I'll ask you about the makeup of them in a minute. But firstly, what about the fact that the U.S., should it not be obliged now to help France more if people are saying that it's the U.S.'s fault? Because at the moment it seems to be taking rather well, distancing itself from what's happening in Mali.
Not at all. They are involved. They are providing intelligence. They are actually going to be probably committing transport to bring in African Union troops from other countries. But this could be a double-edged sword because given the uncertainty and the volatility within Mali itself, many of the foreign troops come in and could actually stage their own coups and take over the country. So this is a very, very dicey situation, and it also represents a potential long-term Afghanistan-like effect for France itself, and inadvertently it could suck the United States back into yet another war.
As I mentioned earlier, who exactly are these rebels? It's very easy just to say Al-Qaeda, but it's more complicated than that. Oh yeah,
it's a group of Tuaregs who were part of they're tribesmen. And they were trained, and and they've linked up with other tribesmen and other groups. And there's a number of groups that comprise Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb.
So Michael, just to make it clear then, so these groups are actually homegrown in Mali, or has there been an element of an importation of Islamism coming from other countries?
Both. You have internal and you have external. You're going to have foreign fighters who have been part of AQIM for some time, and this is, as I said earlier, this is all part of a grand Al-Qaeda central strategy out of Pakistan these days. So I think it's laying a foundation to launch more attacks into Europe ultimately. EU is very concerned about it, I might add. So they're seeing the potential threat.
So what's happening in Mali is provoking possible attacks in Europe and elsewhere, and yet the French seem to be wanting to stamp out Islamism and stop the Islamists taking over not just the whole of the north of Mali, but also the rest of the country, and yet just bombing them and using a military exercise against them, does that really get rid of an ideology and the actual threat?
No, I don't think so, because after 10 years of doing something similar in Afghanistan, we're ready to pull out, and Taliban's ready to move back in. So there's some question as to just how effective this approach is going to be. And I think that this is something that the French are going to have to weigh for themselves, but it also could bring a number of other countries back into a long, drawn-out conflict. Already, Germany is beginning to show some resistance to this and are concerned about the extent of help that they give, simply because they see another protracted effort such as they experienced in Afghanistan.
Well, that's exactly what the rebels are saying, aren't they? They're saying France is falling into a trap, could be facing another Iraq, Afghanistan, indeed another Libya. So you think they could be right here, that France has taken on a challenge that it may not be able to cope with, along with other countries?
No, I think so, because I think they're actually, it's almost like a strategy on the part of the rebels to draw them in. And I would add that Russia has a lot to be concerned about in this area, in this region, because of investments and their own investments in the area to protect. And they of course agreed to the UN to the UN Security Council resolution to provide assistance to the French. So it's a dicey situation. It's larger than Mali per se, and it could affect the entire North Africa and into Europe. And I think that is perhaps the concern from a geostrategic and political standpoint.
So this conflict could go on a lot longer. France is ambitious and positive, saying this is going to be over very quickly. Just quickly, what about François Hollande? If we start seeing those, well, we're seeing the troops now with their first combat battles on the ground at the moment. 2,500 troops going to be engaged on the ground there. If casualties start coming back, and indeed we see retaliatory attacks on French ground, on French soil, what does that do for François Hollande and the political situation there?
Well, I think it puts him on ill at ease politically, because even though he's made a very strong stand that he's going to fight him, he's going to resist him. Now, he's just been recently elected president, so he has a ways to go. But I think you're going to quickly see if the Malian rebels are able to do something within France. I think it could either make citizens there very concerned, and or they may just say get out altogether to avoid the conflict. He's in a very precarious situation right now.
Michael, thank you very much indeed. Really interesting talking to you. Michael Maloof, former Pentagon official, live in Washington. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.